One kid killing the parents is a bad seed. Two kids killing the parents is a bad family.
Name again for the record, please.
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
All right, I'll remind you that you're still under oath, and you may continue your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, the other day we were talking about the expectations that your family had for you, particularly your father. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he had expectations of you, particularly with regard to sports. Is that correct?
Yes.
But he also had plans for you in terms of where you'd go to school, where you would work, etc. Is that correct?
My whole life.
Who was going to make the decisions as to which schools you would go to?
Objection, Vegas to time.
Who made the decision as to where you went to high school?
I would say my dad, but I really don't know if it's my dad and mom or my dad.
Did you make it?
No.
Who made the decision as to where you went to college?
That was my dad.
Did you want to go to Princeton?
It was fine with me.
Did you ever express an interest in going somewhere else?
Yes.
Where did you want to go to school?
I wanted to go to school at University of Pennsylvania or somewhere closer to where my girlfriend was going to go to school.
And did you apply to University of Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Were you accepted?
Yes.
Did you tell your father you wanted to go there to school?
Yes.
And yet you ended up at Princeton.
Right.
Left to make your own selection, where would you have gone to school?
University of Pennsylvania.
Did your parents also express strong opinions with regard to who your girlfriends were?
Very much so.
Who was your first girlfriend?
Stacy Feldman.
And is that the picture that's up on the board?
Yes.
And what years were you and Stacy together?
Until I was 18, I started between 15 and 16.
And did you consider this a serious relationship?
Yes.
Did you talk to her about marriage?
Yes.
Did you two pick out the names for the children you were going to have?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overall.
Yes.
And did you buy Stacy presents?
Yes.
What kind of presents did you buy her?
Jewelry, flowers every Friday.
What kind of flowers would you give her every Friday?
Roses every Friday.
What kind of jewelry did you buy her?
Bracelets and like a few hard pendants. Got her an emerald hard pendant for her birthday, and lots of gifts, and a whole family of stuffed animals.
When you say a whole family of stuffed animals, how many stuffed animals did you get her?
Like 20 of these white teddy bears that we called Pookies.
Why did you call them Pookies?
That was because of the Garfield cartoon. He has a little white, or a little teddy bear that's called, he calls Pookie. When he gets insecure, he always gets his teddy bear, so I got her that because we were apart so much as I lived with my parents. And
Did you think that animals would be comforting to her?
yes, they were soft, and they had made me feel safer. And when you're feeling lost, and her parents were divorced and there were problems, and for me it was very comforting. It gave me, you could have your own little family there in the room with you and play. And so slowly built up a family for her.
Were the animals that you had like family for you?
Yes, they were, they, especially early on, but really all the way through my teenage years, sometimes they got me through the day.
How did they get you through the day?
Just taking me out of where I was and into this other world of these friends was very important to me, and as I got older, it was embarrassing because really, stuffed animals are for little kids, but they were just important to me.
Is it embarrassing for you to talk about it?
Yes.
At one point, did Stacy tell you that she was going to break up with you?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was 18.
And how did you feel about that? Did you buy her something then, a big present to try and...
Bought her a fur coat, or actually I made payments on a fur coat.
How much?
I wanted to give to her.
How much was the what did you have to pay to get the fur coat?
I put down $150 or something like that.
And you were going to make payments?
Right.
Did she take the coat?
No.
And were you working at the time?
No.
Where was the money going to
I
come?
was training, playing tennis and stuff, but I wasn't working.
Where did the money come for all these animals and jewelry and fur coats?
My parents, they didn't necessarily give me the money for those purposes, but there was just money. My house had money just laying around, and
What do you mean just laying around?
my dad, every time he came home, he took out his pockets and he'd throw his money and his credit cards and everything on the counter, and just wouldn't pick it up the next day. My mom didn't do anything, and there would just be money around. And sometimes I would use that, but my mom and dad gave me quite a bit of money frequently.
Did you have use of credit cards?
Well, I had the money access card, which
How-
I used mostly. I had a credit card also, my mom's credit card that I was authorized to use, but mostly I just used the money access machine where you just put in the card and take out $100 or something, and it was never a problem.
How old were you when you were authorized to use the money access card?
It was when we started in Pennington, since 6th grade, 12.
Would you travel sometimes without your parents?
Sometimes.
For
Certainly later on I did.
after the relationship ended with Stacy, who was your next girlfriend?
Jamie.
Yeah. Did your parents approve of the relationship with Stacy?
No.
Did they approve of the relationship with Jamie?
Much less so.
And what did they disapprove of with regard to your relationship with Jamie?
Number one, they felt that she was after family money. She was a gold digger. And they felt the same thing about Stacy, although that was more my mom's feeling that she did not want me to be with any girls from a broken home, and the parents lived apart. And Stacy's mother had a boyfriend, and my mom was constantly complaining about that. But with Jamie, it was that she was after the money, and also she was always dressed in tennis clothes, so she had tennis skirts on and things of that sort, and my dad thought she was a slut. And my mother was just sort of beside herself about Jamie, and the first time Jamie presented herself to my family, she was dressed like that, and apparently my mom heard about it, and it just started from day one.
Did your dad tell you at some point of something he had done to try to interfere with that relationship?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well,
Was
the worst thing he did
was Jamie a tennis player?
she was a tennis player, and for a short period of time on a tennis tour because of my dad.
And how did that happen?
She was working in Alabama and at a tennis club, and my dad arranged secretly for her to be sponsored, because I was now at Princeton, and she was coming to see me a lot, and whenever I could, I went to see her, and this was upsetting my dad greatly. It's distracting me. So his idea was to send her off on the pro tour around the world. So he financed that through other people that approached her as if they were friends of the club and helped finance her. Some of the people were financing legitimately, but the bulk of it was my dad's money. We didn't know it at the time. I found out later from him, and other relatives of mine knew about it and talked to me about it also.
Your next girlfriend after Jamie was Christy, is that right?
Right.
And at some point, did Christy tell you that she thought she was pregnant?
Yes.
And did the relationship end with her shortly after that? In the spring of '89, did you have a relationship with a young woman named Christy?
Yes.
And after you found out, after she told you that she might be pregnant, did the relationship end shortly after that?
Yes.
And did your father tell you he had done something in relationship to that relationship?
Yes.
And what was that?
He had approached her, and he said he had approached her and paid her and basically intimidated her into getting an abortion.
After that, did you date a young woman named Charmaine?
Yes.
And how did you happen to meet Charmaine?
Well, after I broke up with Christy, actually the same day, or the next day, that I was sort of very down about it, and my dad came up to me and said, you know, I have a girl you should date, and you should meet her and give her a call. She's wonderful, and she may be going to Princeton, and this is the girl for you, and gave me the number and told me to call, and so I called.
How did your dad know her?
She was the daughter of a business associate of his.
And is this the first relationship that your parents approved of?
The only one.
In addition to going to Princeton, had she won some other title?
Yes. Dad said she was Rose Bowl queen. She was a beauty queen winner for the Rose Bowl parade. And
I'm showing you what we've marked as 243. Is this Charmaine?
yes, it is.
Did your dad say he wanted you to marry her?
No.
Who was going to make the decision about who you married?
Well, Dad, we talked about that, and Dad said that he hadn't really decided what I was going to be doing exactly, as far as whether it was going to be politics or whether it was going to be business or exactly what. And once I had figured that out and was set in that, we would find out.
Who was going to figure this out, whether it was business or politics?
My dad. I wasn't going to be able to do it without my dad, and he was, you know, he hadn't decided yet. And at the time we talked about this, I was a tennis player and thought that I was going to be going in that direction, but
So since he hadn't decided yet whether you were going to go into business or politics, what was the connection between that and you getting married?
Well, once we figured that out, we could decide what was the most, what was the appropriate girl. Like Charmaine seemed to be good for politics. But it just, the temperament of the girl, and just, obviously he would never want me to date somebody like Christy, who was too, he didn't think she was smart enough. And if I was going to be at business functions and so on, his experiences, somebody that's smart, knows the right things to say, will just sort of follow along with him, like my mother.
Now, who was going to pick this wife? Was it going to be you?
I don't know. We just talked about it in the abstract, and I imagine it would. He would approve of whatever. I just expected that he would eventually approve of a particular girl. We never really discussed that. I know that the choices I had made were disastrous according to them, and no way was I marrying these girls.
Did you love these girls? Did you love Stacy?
Yeah, yes.
And Jamie?
Yes.
And Christy was a shorter relationship, I take it?
Yes.
Was this okay with you, that your dad was going to decide what your future was going to be and approve who you married?
Yes.
You talked about going to Princeton and that you had applied to other schools as well. Did you fill out the college applications?
No.
Did you pick the schools that you applied to?
No, except that I asked that University of Pennsylvania be one of them.
And who picked the schools you were going to apply to?
I don't know. I mean, my mother was in charge of all the applications. She sent them out, she got the forms, and she filled them out. So I don't know if she was picking them or my dad. More than likely it would be my dad.
You said she filled out the applications.
Right.
Who wrote the essays that went with the applications?
My mom, but I don't know. I got the essays in essay form. So I copied them.
You didn't write them?
No.
Did you assume that this is the way everybody applied to college?
Overall.
And my mom, the main essay was about my mom's dad, and I'm pretty sure she wrote that because it was all her personal knowledge of him. So that was probably her.
Did you think that this is the way everybody applied to college?
I thought it was. And then I talked to some of my friends, and Stacy filled out her own applications, but I thought that was because her parents didn't get along and the relationships were there were, it was a broken home, and she sort of went back and forth. I thought it was because she had no choice or something, but I assumed that that's what happened. All through my tennis sports life, I never filled out an entry form. My mom did everything with regards to that. I pretty much had no idea. Even my dad didn't have an idea of what tournament I was going to be playing next, unless it was a major championship and we knew it was coming up. We would find out like 2 weeks before. My mom would say, you have this coming up, and then my dad would start preparing. So it was the same with school.
And when you were in high school, who did your homework for you in high school?
my mother did a lot of it. My dad wrote some of the papers if he wanted to. I did. Otherwise, I didn't really do homework as much as I did studying for tests, papers, things that had to be handed in like that. Pretty much just got a grade off for the homeworks, or my dad had somebody do them all at the end of the year, and I handed them in late and just got a half grade. And this hurt my grades somewhat, but I seem to get a lot of leniency from the teachers because, I mean, of all the sports activities and all the things I was doing after school.
When you went to Princeton, did things change? Did you start doing all your own homework and papers?
No, it didn't change.
And who was doing the work for you in college? Was your dad doing some of the work for you in college?
Yes.
And would he decide which things he wanted to do?
Yes.
And did you have an assignment to write a paper about a work by Machiavelli?
I don't know if it was the do about Machiavelli or they gave you a bunch of choices. I think they gave you choices, and Dad picked Machiavelli. That was just one of the things we had talked about early on in our life and all the way through, the kind of historical battles and things like that. So he, I was always reporting to him, and he was always wanting to know exactly what the assignments were, and especially since there was a lot of choices at Princeton as to what essays you would do or what electives, and so Dad wanted to know the choices, so he could, if he saw something that he could do easy, then he could just do it for me, and I could save the time. Then I'd have more time for.
And did you turn in a paper?
I got a bad grade because he did it without the book. So I had the book in New Jersey, and I kept telling him, you should buy a copy of the book. And he said, oh, no, I know all this.
And were you criticized because this was not truly a reflection of the book, but more a reflection of his own philosophy?
Yeah.
Did you get a bad grade on it for a particular reason?
Yes, the teacher said that it was interesting, but that it was basically just my ruminations and not reflective of Machiavelli's actual work in The Prince.
And whose ruminations actually are contained in that paper?
My dad's.